Hi everyone, welcome to week 5. In this week, we continue on our lecture by looking at the next affordance that technology or digital technology has afforded us, which is collaborative intelligence. That's this one here. Bill Cope and Mary Kalantzis, they define collective intelligence as knowledge that you can reach out and use. Knowledge from others, from your peers, from experts, from others that, tapping back on recursive feedback, knowledge that you can use, not only that you can readily access, but also that you can then incorporate into your own knowledge making. I've posted a few videos, lectures from both Bill Cope and Mary Kalantzis this week on collaborative intelligence. And on collaborative intelligence, the first video talks about social learning by Cope. So in this video about social learning, again, Cope is posing that same question to us about what's new in technology that changes the way we do things. So in this week, what he's interested in discussing is what's new in technology that changes the way intelligence is being perceived. So then he went back into a little bit of history to where traditionally in our westernized culture, intelligence, we value individual intelligence. So if you look at the way our education system is being set up, how grading is being set up, a lot of times we value each individual student's input into the class, each individual student's artifacts, their written paper, their presentation. So a lot of it is, trying to, I guess, gauge what an individual knows, what they know, and what we think their intelligence is, versus collaborative intelligence. So collaborative intelligence it doesn't necessarily always means group work, although it certainly can include group work. Group work is certainly a part of collaborative intelligence. But rather, Bill Cope is talking about this shift of what I know as an individual learner to what I can produce because of the feedback and the knowledge and the help and the mentoring and all of these affordances from technology, all of this help that I can get because of technology. What can I produce because of that? So the artifact that I produce, even though I personally produce it, then becomes an example of a collaborative intelligence, because the only reason why I can produce this specific artifact is because I could get the feedback on a timely manner from this person, the piece that I needed from this expert that allows me to use it in my work, and my peer critique that allows me to improve my work, and to its current stage. So that is the shift that Bill Cope was talking about in social learning, about collaborative intelligence. So I thought it was a pretty convincing argument that there's certainly, I certainly have seen a shift from the way we value, what I know individually from what I read, to what I can produce because of all these input that I get from other people. So again, the other shift that he talks about, besides the shift from what I know to what I can produce because of the feedback and knowledge that I get, is this shift from individual displays of expertise to problem solving. So more and more you see things like problem-based learning, project-based learning. All of these really is trying to tap at the importance of problem solving versus what you know individually. So you could be an expert in one field, and that expertise may be needed in order to solve this problem. But a lot of times, problem solving is complex. It requires input from many different people with many different kinds of expertise. So Bill Cope is saying that with the affordance of technology, we've been able to do that a lot easier, a lot quicker, a lot more efficient. And because of that, the shift to more problem-solving related kind of learning has actually taken root in education. And then the second type of collaborative intelligence in the second video that I posted was actually given by Mary Kalantzis. And in this, she talks about collaborative learning dynamics. So what is collaborative learning dynamics? It means collaborative work that produces collaborative intelligence. So here's what we traditionally, our understanding of collaborative learning dynamics is a knowledge community. So I think most of us as educators, we value the benefits of having a knowledge community. Like even in this class, I view this class, this course itself as a knowledge community, as a professional learning community of peers, like-minded people, sharing of ideas, collaborating on things, brainstorming. So different perspectives and inputs can lead to higher standards and depth of knowledge. And I've seen that happening quite a bit, even in this class itself. That because you have so many different perspectives and so many different inputs, the final piece of work that you produce as an individual, because of those interactions, becomes of a higher standard, and it reflects a depth of knowledge. The other point that she made is about commitment and contribution in the learning environment. So basically, here she's talking about motivation that Bill Cope also talked about in depth in his third video about extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. So in general, we as learners, we are motivated by external motivation, such as our grades, our final grade. What is it that I want to get an A? So that's an extrinsic motivation. However, when you have a learning community, such as a discussion forum, it's kind of low stake. You are free to express your views and all of that, and help each other out. So when you have this kind of learning environment, Mary Kalantzis basically said that it fosters a kind of commitment to your group. So you feel like if you don't contribute in depth or give a quality feedback, you felt like you are held to that certain standard by your peers, and you don't want to let your peers down. So because of that commitment, that feelings of commitment and the contribution in the learning environment creates a better output at the end. The artifact is better. So the next point is every learner is a knowledge maker and a resource to others. So here again, going back to collaborative learning, when we talk about individual intelligence versus collaborative intelligence, here we're not saying we don't value individuality or that we don't value individual work. Actually, far from it. We do value individual work, so much so that we view each independent learner as a knowledge maker. So we don't view you as a consumer of the knowledge, a passive consumer of knowledge. Instead, we view each of you in this course as a knowledge maker. So you are actively making knowledge, and you are actively being a resource to your other classmates in this class. And we could cite you. We could say, oh, thank you, so-and-so for sharing this specific resource with me. Now I can incorporate it within my project, for example. So you can cite each other, you are a resource to others, and you yourself is a knowledge maker. An example of that I wanted to point out is open educational resources, also known as OER. Open educational resources is a huge deal in this year's Blackboard Learning Conference that I just went to last summer. So basically what it is it's talking about problem solving, right? So we know that in higher ed, one of the costs that drives up, that was burdensome to students is the cost of textbooks. So textbooks are really expensive. And how in higher learning we can help combat that or help students lower their textbook costs is that we can start using open educational resources, which are free for all educational use. So, for example, there are, if you look up, or if you Google OER under open educational resources on Google, you find a lot of different websites that offer anything from full courses, kind of like a MOOC course, to certain chapters that an educator has authored and want to share with you, to lesson plans, to educational materials. So quizzes and stuff like that. So people actually actively share these things on the website, and they said, I created this. I found it useful in my class. Feel free to use it within your own course. So that is, to me, a really interesting way of, collaborating with people and experts that you don't even know, but you can use their material. So, for example, in this course, Bill Cope and Mary Clancy's videos, they have them posted in a public domain that anybody can use. So that will be an example of an open educational resource that educators like myself can tap into. So your chapter readings for this week is chapter 11 on engagement in e-learning. So when we talk about engagement in e-learning, what are we specifically referring to? We are referring to meaningful psychological interaction. So keyword being meaningful and psychological interaction. So interaction in e-learning, I always have to tell people this. You can have physical interaction, like clicking of a mouse, click on a button, right? But what we're looking for here is meaningful psychological interaction, meaning what's happening up here that engage you psychologically, okay, between the learner and the instructional environment that promotes the achievement of the learning goal. So we want to know if there are meaningful psychological interaction that's happening in the course that would promote the achievement of your learning goal. So that's what I'm interested in this course. So here, and in your text, this is actually taken from your text, is what I'm talking about earlier about psychological versus behavioral activity. So if you look at psychological activity that's high on psychological activity, right? Here we're looking at something that's mentally active. So when something is high on the psychological activity matrix, it means that you are constantly thinking about it, you're analyzing something, so you're mentally active. Hopefully the discussion forum for this course is set to where it's psychologically engaging and you're mentally active when you are answering and you're posting and you're replying to your classmates. So here is talking about behavioral activity. When it's high on behavioral activity and high on psychological activity, behaviorally and mentally, you're both behaviorally and mentally active. So an example of this would be if you are playing some kind of simulation game, right? But that simulation game also encourage you to apply your critical thinking skills and all of that. So you're actively clicking on it, like video games, for example. You're actively like clicking on it, and you're strategizing in your mind, right? So you're both behaviorally and mentally active. So that's good. So these two here are good. That's what we're trying to achieve. Now here is where it's low on psychological activity and low on behavioral activity, meaning it's mindless and passive. An example of this would be if I have a course that just text-based and everything is just this long PDFs that you're supposed to read, nothing else to guide you, nothing to make you, think or do any of that, then it could be mindless and passive, kind of like busy work. Over here is mindless activity, where you have high behavioral activity but low psychological engagement. So here I always think about those kind of training that we have to do so that certain departments can check off a box to say yes, that training has been done by this new hire. And a lot of times it's just clicking over to the next slide, click, 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 click. Okay, you're done. Check the box, right? So those are mindless activity that you do. You just go through the motion, but you don't necessarily engage you at a psychological level. Therefore, you're not really learning much as well. So what are some effective engagement techniques that you can use in your own course if you're teaching, or that you can suggest to new faculty to use within their courses? So here's a list, again, that's taken from your textbook of effective engagement techniques: relevant graphics, supported drawing, collaborative observations of tutoring, peer teaching, self-explanation, asking questions practice. So we'll go over some of these in this presentation as well. So the first one, relevant graphics. This we already covered in multimodal learning and about multimedia principle. Generally, I think all of you have already known this, is that narrated animation and text and graphic in general works better than words only. So learning is better from words and pictures alone than words alone. So whenever you can, if you are creating an e-learning course, if you're doing something online, it's generally a good idea to have some kind of meaningful graphics to go with the text rather than just having long text that students have to read. And then the second one is collaborative observation. So here, the textbook talks about pairs of learners solving problems while viewing a video of tutor helping a different learner solve the same problem, learn as much as the students who were directly tutored and more than students who just studied. So I thought this was a pretty interesting experiment about collaborative observation. So it's saying that even if you are not being helped directly by a tutor, if you even just watch a video of a tutor, right, helping a different learner solve the problem that you have, you actually learn as much as the person who's getting directly tutored, which is why instructional videos work so well. So if I'm tutoring person A about a specific problem that student B couldn't attend but view the recording of it, student B gets the same benefit as student A, is what this experiment talk about. And certainly they learn as much as, certainly they learn more than students who just studied by themselves. So that's another evidence, I guess, supporting collaborative learning, collaborative observation. The other one, of course, that we're all familiar with is peer teaching. So in peer teaching, research have shown that people who does the teaching learns more compared to a student who only study the material or a student who prepared to teach but then does not teach. Okay, so here is saying that the act of teaching actually is very beneficial. You actually learn more by teaching your peers something compared to a student who only studied the materials or a student who prepared the teaching material but then never taught it. Okay. The other one about collaborative learning is asking questions during learning. I remember when we have our collaborate session for the student orientation, when we open it up for questions was the most interesting part because you get input from students and all of that. And actually research has shown that using response clicker during college improved grade point average. If your college or your school uses iClicker, at HPU we adopt iClickers, so some instructors use them. So the use of response clicker during college lecture actually improves GPA. The goal really here is to turn a passive event into an active event. So examples of that can be polls, can be chat, can be on-screen markup for student response in synchronous classes. So if we do a synchronous session in this class, I always like to incorporate, a certain pause, some pause in the middle of a presentation, and then try to take a poll or try to say, hey, how many of you think of this? Just to get, engagement from students, to get them thinking, and then to get them to, or you can even call out students within a synchronous session to ask them what they think about a certain issue. Support during engagement. So here we're talking that engagement itself isn't enough. It's not enough to throw a group of students together and say, here, talk to each other and engage with each other. Generally, guidance and structure is needed in order to optimize that engagement. Because, if I just create a forum for you each week and I said, okay, you guys just go ahead and discuss this week's topic, and I never gave you any guidance, I never told you what you should focus on and all of that, that is proven to be not as effective as a more structured kind of engagement. The other thing is intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. So again, going back to learning as moving in a cohort, the beauty of studying in a cohort and that feeling that you have a sense of community is that besides the extrinsic motivation, which is getting a good grade for this class, you also feel an intrinsic motivation that you want to engage in this class, you want to talk to your classmates, you want to contribute to this learning community. Okay, so another chapter that I signed for reading this week is chapter 14 on collaborative learning. So collaborative learning, according to the text for e-learning, is anything that is to do with assignments for teams of 2 or more individuals using synchronous or asynchronous communication modes that support instructional goals. So when we talk about collaborative learning and e-learning, this is the exact definition that we talk about. Two or more people, and they're using either synchronous or asynchronous communication tools to support an instructional mode. So what affects collaborative learning outcomes? Why is it that some collaborative learning outcomes are better and some not so good? So here are some conditions that would pretty much determine, or at least I should say affect, yeah, that would affect the quality of the collaborative learning outcomes. So first we look at is the group, features of the group. So when we talk about features of the group, what are we talking about, or what are we looking at? We're looking at group size. So how many people in a group? We're looking at group composition, who makes up the group, and we're looking at the group collaborative skills. So among these people who are in the group, how's their collaborative skill? So that alone, that condition, the features of the group, is one of the factors that contributes towards the effectiveness of collaborative learning. Now, the second factor is features of the learning environment itself. So we're looking at structure. Does the assignment have any kind of structure and guidance? We're looking at assignment difficulty. Is it a very easy task that individuals can complete on themselves for themselves easily, or is it a difficult task? And we're looking at social presence among the faculty and the peers. And then the last piece of condition is technology, of course. When we look at technologies in an e-learning setting, we're looking at whether they are synchronous or asynchronous. We're looking at communication modes. Are you using text, audio, video? Are you using emails? What are you using? What kind of technology are you using for this collaboration? And then also the support. So let's say if the technology isn't working, then any of this is mute. You can't collaborate, right? If the technology itself isn't working. So when we look at the use for challenging tasks, here is basically saying if it is a simple task, right, a very simple task, actually it is better for an individual to do it by himself or by herself. But then the harder the cases is, the more useful it is to have, the more challenging, I guess, the task, the more useful it is to have collaboration or collaborative type of assessments where the learners are collaborating with each other. So here's the chart to show the difference between solo and teamwork. So the blue bar here is solo. So when the problems or the assignment is of low complexity, then it is actually a little bit more productive for learners to do it by themselves, solo, versus team, because team takes a lot of effort to coordinate, and then you got to hash it out, you got to brainstorm. There's a lot of factors going into it, right? So it's actually more conducive to do low complexity problems by themselves. Now, that changes when it's a high complexity problem. So when it's a higher complexity problems that require multiple inputs, multiple expertise from different people, all of a sudden it's so much better to do it via a team versus a solo. And then more on this, we want to talk about maximizing social presence online. So social presence online is really trying to minimize the feeling of feeling in a silo. So I'm sure when all of you first sign up for a fully online program, one of your concern may be that you may feel like it's just, this feeling of being in a silo by yourself, right? Just you and your computer and your imaginary classmate and your imaginary instructor, right? Teaching you, and you are just doing all these readings by yourself and then doing all these discussion postings and papers by yourself. So we really want to try to minimize that by maximizing social presence online. Now, how can you do that? Here are some guidance, right? As an instructor, you can give timely responsive to online posts, or even as a peer, you can give timely feedback on online postings. So that feel like you get some social presence from your classmates and from your instructor. Being able to share relevant beliefs and values, your teaching values, what you believe in, and all of that. So sharing on this, share relevant beliefs and values. Here, I actually just recently, like yesterday, I read this article about why there's so many people who are feeling lonely these days. And one of the things that struck me was that the author was talking about how loneliness isn't the feeling of being alone. It's not necessarily that you are alone and therefore you feel loneliness. Loneliness is actually the inability to share meaningful things with another person. So I thought about this a lot. It was, to me, it was pretty profound that it changes the way we view loneliness, and in this case the way we view presence in an online course is that it's not enough to know that there are other classmates in this class and that you have an instructor in this class, but you want to feel that you can actually share something that's meaningful to yourself, whether that be your beliefs, your values, something you feel strongly about, with like-minded people, and have that being accepted and discussed about and things like that, which is why I value the discussion forum so much. So as an instructor, you want to promote an open environment. So because without an open environment, that cannot happen, that exchange cannot happen. And also refer to learners by name. So I do this a lot. And I try to do this all the time, is that whenever I'm addressing a learner or I'm giving feedback to a learner, I address them by their first name because I want them to know that this feedback isn't some generic feedback that is applicable to everybody, kind of like astrology, but rather is actually for you. I have read your comment and your contribution. I have read your assignment, and this is my feedback for you, and I want to refer you by your name. Okay. The other thing we want to talk about is using structured collaboration process. So structured collaboration process, again, going back to what does that mean? What does that look like? So in structured collaboration process, generally there are three phases that you want to look at. The first phase, phase one, is reviewing of the problem. So in a group or in a class, you review the problem together, right? So that you all have the same starting point. We all understand what the general issue is, what we're trying to accomplish here. So you review the problem together. And then after that, you break people in phase two into groups. So you prepare and deliver pros and con arguments. So one team will be the pro team, for example. The other team is the con team. And here is where you have the exchange happening. We put here argumentation, but it doesn't necessarily have to mean something negative. It really just means an exchange of idea, playing devil's advocate. So you don't all think the same way. And so you look at, for example, an educational issue, right, from a general standpoint, and then you break into two groups. One group looks at the pro, the other group look at the con, and then you just kind of have this discussion or this argumentation or this critique about the issue. And then the last phase is you all coming together, right, and developing a synthesis of how all these pieces fit together. So I think that's a great way of looking at a collaboration process and how that can be done meaningfully. So the last thing here we look at is the principles for effective collaboration. So basically, it's just a summary of all the things that we already talked about, used for challenging tasks. If you want people to collaborate and work on something, make sure that the task that you give them is challenging and of some difficult level, so that it does require feedback and perspective from multiple people. You want to optimize the group size, the composition, the people who are in it, and the interdependence between each of these experts, right? You want to match synchronous and asynchronous assignment to the collaborative goal. Use tool features that optimize the group process. This is talking about technology here. Maximize social presence and use structured assignment.